If I think back on when I first started to get sick was around second grade. I stopped eating the food at home and the food my mom would prepare me because I was getting bullied in school. Probably wouldn't have had that onset of getting sick so young if I had just stuck to the Mediterranean diet that I was raised eating.
Welcome to the Eat, Play, Crush podcast. I am your host, Mary Shenouda.
Welcome to today's episode of the Eat, Play, Crush podcast. I am your host, Mary Shenouda. It's another solo episode, and it's the beginning of a new year. It's also my birthday week. I generally don't view the new year until my birthday. I'm a January baby. I'm a Capricorn. I'm sure many of you could have guessed that. And I want to take you guys back through my origin story because one of the first questions I get asked is what got me into nutrition and what got me into being a performance chef. And my response is usually glazed over and the same, and it seems to catch people off guard. But I was sick my entire life. And if you told me when I was in grade school or junior high that I would be a performance chef, that wasn't, I wanted to be a marine biologist and then a dentist and then a singer, but I have absolutely no talent singing. So I became the paleo chef and what I do now out of necessity. And for me, pain was my normal. It started in second grade and continued through into my young adulthood. And I was an anomaly. I was the elephant in the room for the doctor. I would get horrible misdiagnosis. I would get medications up the wazoo, constantly giving blood. And it wasn't until about seventh grade where I started to just give in to pain being my normal. And I remember making a deal with God that if I'm going to suffer as much as I am, and I'm going to carry that burden, that I hope someone somewhere else is suffering less. And I would sort of integrate what it's like to be in pain in my day-to-day activities. I was an athlete and I had a coach that understood how awful my migraines were, and I would lose some of my eyesight when I would have a migraine. And she would put me into a game. I would have a few minutes before I would lose sight, before I needed to get off to sideline and put a head wrap on. And I would look at her and she'd take me out of the game and we'd repeat this process. I would stay at birthday parties till the very last moment where I knew I was about to throw up because I just knew that I was going to always be in pain, but I didn't want it to affect my life, my livelihood, my upbringing. And again, this continued on through high school. Many of you may know I'm a high school dropout. I went straight into corporate technology after high school. And again, I'm constantly in pain. I'm at my desk with peers who are 15 years my senior, and you just can't have a bad day. So I'm trying to negotiate with myself of how can I make my environment at work a place where I can get work done and forecast these migraines, these hormone issues, these rashes. I could literally write my name in my skin and would raise up. It's called dermographia. And I also made room for the 1 or 2 ER visits per month. That was just normal for me. So at that point, I didn't quite understand why I was so assertive in every other part of my life, but not necessarily with my health. It's like I just gave control to the doctors to tell me, we don't know what to do with you, here's a pill. And when you are in the ER for a migraine, you can't really treat a migraine. So what they do is they give you morphine and something for the nausea, and the morphine doesn't really take away the pain, and it's through an IV. It just knocks you out until the pain can go away. But the hangover from the morphine is truly awful. It would give me so much anxiety, and it was always a absolute last resort for me. And by last resort, I would have migraines that would cause me to vomit so much that I would pass out from dehydration, and somebody would find me in a pool of vomit and I'd be rushed to the ER. And when you are young and they find you like that, they assume you've taken drugs and you're trying to explain to the nurses that it's just a migraine, and they don't believe you, and it becomes a very tumultuous situation. And it's just something that is not a very good experience, and you feel very betrayed by the people in the room who don't take you at your word. And so I remember distinctly my very last ER visit. I was scared to get the morphine. I did not want the morphine. And I started to ask more detailed questions around wanting an explanation as to, can somebody explain to me what's causing a migraine? What's the mechanism that's happening here? And that's something that I would do. I'm very inquisitive at work, and I just didn't get that inquisitive with my health and my migraines. And it seemed that the more I was asking those questions of the origin of the migraine, the more frustrated the nurses were getting, and then accusing me again of taking drugs and not being honest about what was in my system. And I had it. I didn't want the morphine. I was frustrated by the lack of answers, didn't have my laptop on me to go Google the answers, and in a very dramatic fashion, ripped the IV out of my arm and stormed out of the hospital and just started to dive into the mitochondrial function, which, if people were paying attention, and I mean like pay attention to what's going on around you, I was orbiting the answer of what was going on with my health for a majority of my life, but didn't really put two and two together. So as I'm trying to find out the mechanism of a migraine, and I come upon the data around supporting a mitochondrial function, hat tip to Terry Walls, Dr. Terry Walls, her TED Talk, Minding the Mitochondria Changed My Life. I had done a presentation with a lab partner in high school all about the mitochondrial function. We rewrote the words to a Beastie Boys song to fight for your right to ATP. And I didn't put two and two together that I'd already been orbiting some answers. And then if we go back to junior high, my technical paper for the science fair was about how I believed ADHD to be an autoimmune disease and how you could treat it by supporting some of the nutrient deficiencies commonly associated with the brain and ADHD. And again, orbiting this idea of autoimmune dysfunction and nutrient levels and supporting your mitochondria. So as I'm diving in all of this, and this is around 2010, 2011, the word paleo is becoming popular, and there are people talking about gluten intolerance. Now, I had been tested for gluten intolerance as I was getting tested for cancer and lupus and all these other things throughout my life. I used to have to pee in this gigantic orange container that was the size of a medium dog, and it had like skull and crossbones on there, and I would have to pee in that for them to do some sort of testing because they really were trying to find out sources. They told me that I was allergic to fish, which, fun little side story. I had sushi all the time, and they were like, oh, you have mercury toxicity, and they told me I had to stop eating sushi. It was a very heartbreaking moment for me. I actually wrote a breakup letter to sushi that I posted on MySpace days. And my office, we were in a high-rise building. We were facing the freeway, and my desk faced the freeway. And my colleagues took a photo of me where I was sticking out of my tongue and blew it up large enough that you could see it from the freeway. And they put sushi pieces all around my face. And the game in the office was pin the sushi on Mary's tongue because they knew how I had to break up with sushi. In hindsight, I was not allergic to fish. It was actually the soy sauce I was having every single day because the soy sauce has gluten and I have a gluten intolerance. So going back to gluten becoming a topic of conversation and paleo becoming a topic of conversation, I found out that blood tests for celiac disease and gluten intolerance can be up to 60 to 70% inconclusive. So I found a different lab that I could send my stool sample to. And I was totally expecting a gluten intolerance to come back. But what came back from the lab was actually that I was a full-blown celiac and I had intolerance to casein, which is a protein found in dairy, and soy. Another little side story. When you are doing a stool test, it's an at-home kit. So you have to do this yourself, and you have to freeze your stool overnight before it can be shipped overnight to the lab. And at the time, I had a roommate, and the idea of telling her what was going on was not really something that I wanted to do. We weren't not friends, but it was like still new roommate, still very business, rent's due at this time. Oh, you got half on this. And so I wasn't really going to get into the details of my health. And the container they give you for the stool test looks like like a pint of ice cream. So I did the test, double bagged it, put it in another bag, stuck it in the back of the freezer, and did not tell Nicole till way after that my specimen was in the freezer. And then you have to overnight it. So I'm sitting at my desk and I get a notification that my package had been intercepted. And I had never seen that notification from UPS before. And so I call UPS and I'm trying to be like really quiet. And my desk at the time, the cubicle wall was actually a window because I really loved my cube mate. And we would always like shoot the shit. And so, but I'm trying to be really quiet. And I'm like, hi, I have a package in the mail. It said it's intercepted. Can you tell me what that means? And she's like, oh, that means we've we've temporarily lost your mail. And, it'll get updated when we find it again. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean temporarily lost it? It needs to get to its location today. There's a specimen in that delivery. And she's like, excuse me, ma'am, what? And I go, there's a specimen and it, it needs to get to its destination today. And she's super confused and she's like, I'm sorry, what? And I go, my shit. You literally lost my shit. And I just remember in my peripheral vision seeing my cube mate look at me and go, what? But they did find it a few hours later, and it did make it to its destination, and I did get my results. And someone might be distraught getting that information. Like, what does that mean? I'm a celiac. What does this mean? I can't have dairy. What does this mean? I can't have soy. I was pumped because you have to remember, I have been in pain the majority of my life, like starting in second grade. So the idea to me that if I just remove these ingredients from my diet, that I will know what it's like to not be in pain, elated me. And so I implemented it right away. I've always cooked. I get asked that question too, like, where did I go to culinary school? I didn't. Being Egyptian, cooking is very much part of the culture, and you have tasks as a child. Like my first task was picking cilantro, and then you graduate to something else to help in the kitchen. So the idea again of preparing foods without these ingredients seemed like a fun challenge. And so I implemented it right away. And within 3 months, every symptom that I experienced during that period of my life went away. I distinctly remember waking up without a headache for the first time in almost 2 decades. And for a moment, I thought it was a trick. Like I sat up and everything was clear. And I just had this moment, like looking to my left and right, almost anticipating the familiar pain to come back. I even like shook my head to like double check. And I was pumped. Again, still not thinking about burning down my life and my career to start over. Just this is me just discovery of knowing what it's like to feel good again. So that's 3 months in. And in my corporate job, I would be the person with the sunglasses at the desk. I'd take a lot of breaks because I wasn't feeling good. I'd take naps under my desk. I'd take breaks to go to my car. I'd leave early, et cetera, et cetera. And I was in sales. So as long as you met your quota, which I crushed all the time, having that flexibility was a perk of meeting your quota when you're in tech sales. But my colleagues noticed that I wasn't in as much pain. And they were asking me what I was doing. And at the time, paleo is becoming very popular. And it's much easier to say, oh, I'm following a paleo diet than saying I'm not eating gluten, dairy, and soy. So again, just explaining to them the way that I'm eating. And again, not thinking I'm going to go and pursue this as a career. And somebody in tech had asked me if I would prepare meals for them the way I'm preparing meals for myself, because I'm seeing not just I'm feeling better, but my body composition changed significantly too. This idea of weight versus inflammation, the weight shifted, but so did this widespread swollenness in my body, or the pain in my joints all went away. And I was very full of myself. I was like, I don't cook for people. I manage multi-million-dollar contracts. And they made a comment about, I'm willing to pay someone X amount of dollars to prepare meals for me. And suddenly I grew an invisible beard. was like, wait a second. You can live in San Francisco, make good money, still be broke because the cost of living. So I saw this as a really cool side hustle to support my designer dress habit that I had at the time. And so I took that person as a client, and within, I want to say, like 3 or 4 weeks of taking that person on as a client, I was getting my wisdom teeth removed. And the way that they were coiled around a nerve, so I had to get put under for this. And this story makes sense in a second. So if you're put under, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just talking. And when I came to after the procedure, the oral surgeon said, I'm so excited that you're going to be my private chef. So my subconscious didn't tell this person that I was in tech sales. My subconscious already decided that we're going to lead the conversation with being a private chef and doing performance meals based on lab work. So these were my first 2 clients. I rolled with them for a few months, and then I experimented with putting up a Yelp. I took the URL personal paleo chef and paleo personal chef, both routing to the same webpage, and got another client and then another client, and was still managing my quota and my regular gig. So basically working 7 days a week, producing some days on the weekend up to 120 meals a day. Oh, to be young and full of energy again. I ended up having a physical breakdown on the side of the freeway because I was just so tired. Like I remember pulling over completely drenched in sweat because I was super tired. And I realized that I probably needed to make a choice. I didn't really have an idea of what the next iteration would look like. I just knew I couldn't sustain both. And one was making me very happy, even though it was completely riddled with uncertainty. Nobody was really doing what I was doing. And then the other one, my tech job, was very comfortable, but not satisfying. And not to get into it, being a female in tech in San Francisco definitely had its own challenges. I would hit like 500% of my quota and not be stoked. And my VP would be like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. I'm selling cloud technology. It doesn't feel very exciting. And so in hindsight, it's listening to those cues of what brings you joy, what lights you up, what gets, for me, I love learning and being challenged. And I think I was realizing that I liked the challenge of every client having a new, unique body composition and solving something different for them and helping them realize that they can feel their best and something they may probably have not felt before. So I decide to take the day off and go to the Ferry Building to really think about my life and what I'm going to do next. And one of my colleagues/friends played hooky with me that day. And at this point, I had a few top executives. I had a couple of professional athletes, an author, really big names. And this has to do with timing, luck, opportunity, and then the choice to follow through. At the time, I was the only one doing what I was doing, and I had these really smart URLs. So anyone of status Googling personal paleo chef, because again, paleo is becoming very popular, I was showing up. And this is why I was getting right of first refusal, because I was the one that was out there doing this work. And people would contact me thinking they're going to get a personal chef. And, they're thinking generic meal prep. And I'm like, I need your blood, your hair, your stool, your spit. And they're like, wait, what is this? I go, well, everybody's different, and I need to find what's going to help you work optimally. And so because that was different and was so detailed, my business turned very quickly into a referral only business. So this is timing, luck, opportunity. And now I'm in a moment where I have to decide if I'm going to follow through. So I'm at the Ferry Building, really in my head. I tend to have very binary thinking, and I can get very focused and not really understand what's going on around me as I'm in a moment of thought. So I'm walking towards the door and I see a figure coming towards the door, and I happen to get to the door first. So being the gentleman that I am, I open the door for this person. They are surprised by that gesture and they go, thank you. Chivalry's not dead. And I'm surprised that this person said thank you. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And we go in, my friend and I. And she goes, Mary, are you that obtuse? And I'm like, what, Jen? What? What? And she's like, you took the day off to decide if you want to be a personal chef, if you want to pursue this. And you opened the door for Tyler Florence. And for those of you who don't know, Tyler Florence is an amazing chef in the Bay Area. He has a show on the Food Network. And she's like, how literal of a sign do you need? And I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm leaving corporate America. And the next day, I went and resigned. I took that as the sign. And I had tweeted out to Tyler, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize who you were. Love your restaurants. And we had a quick exchange. And then later on, I actually got to have a more meaningful conversation like several years later. And I brought up that moment for me. And he's like, I actually remember you. And I do remember that moment, which I don't know. Maybe he's not telling the truth, but I'll pretend he was. And so I went to resign the next day. And my sales manager asked me to go back to my desk. And I was like, no, I'm resigning. And he was like, I knew this day would come. You've always have had an entrepreneurial spirit. And he wished me well. Now, not everyone wished me well. I was told by a couple of executives I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I would come crawling back to tech. I had friends who were like, this doesn't make any sense. I had parents who were rightfully concerned. And in my mind, it didn't really seem like a risk, because I may have doubts in situations, but I rarely doubt myself. Moments when I really doubt myself is usually when it gets really dark and I have things that I do to get out of that. But the idea of leaving tech to pursue something didn't seem so scary. I mean, it may have to do with some of my background as well. It's not the scariest thing I've done, but I decided to leave tech. I gave a month's notice. I only actually spent another 2 weeks in tech, and then tried to figure out how to be a performance chef. Took on some more clients in the Bay Area, started to get phone calls in other parts of the United States, started to make a name for myself pretty quickly. And then my gut said it was time to leave the Bay Area. Could not tell you why, because if anyone that knows me knows I love San Francisco with all of my heart, but something really said it was time to go. And I knew that if I did not give myself a hard out, I would have delayed this decision. So my roommate, the one who I had to hide my poo from, at this point, we now have become super close, one of my closest friends. And she's like, you know what? I know you need the hard out, July or die. And so I put in my notice on my beautifully manicured, wonderful, spacious, rent-controlled apartment, put in notice so I'd have no choice but to leave. Had no plans as to where I was going. I didn't know where I needed to go next. I just knew I had to get out of San Francisco because my gut was saying, this is what you need to do. And so July comes. My last day is spent at my friend's engagement party. We're at one of the owners of the ballpark. I get to wear a Giants playoff ring. And I remember thinking, damn, it'd be cool to have one of these rings one day. This is foreshadowing, by the way. That's why I'm telling this part about the ring. I actually have a photo of Brooke and I holding the ring. I'm a huge Giants fan, like stupid Giants fan. There's 2 moments in my life that make me happier than ever. And being at the 2010 World Series is like up there. Baseball makes me believe in love. Being at a World Series game, the energy there is insane. So wearing that ring was such a high. And I actually forgot about the comment I made of like, how cool would it be for this ring, like to have one of these rings. And again, having no idea that I would advance it the way that I did in the career I have now and come to having my own playoff ring as a non-athlete female in a male-dominated industry. So that was pretty cool. I think some people call that manifesting. I wasn't doing it deliberately, but I probably was doing it authentically, being so wonderfully naive to possibility. So that's a really cool memory for me to have forgot and re-remember in this moment. And I remember getting in the car with my other friend who's driving me back to my empty apartment to get in my car and go drop off stuff at my parents' house in the South Bay. And I was just so quiet in the car, and he picked up on that. And I love friends that know how to read your mind in that way. And I think he picked up on how confused and sad I was to leave a city. And he said, you can always come back, but you're doing the right thing. And I didn't respond and just nodded. I remember what street we were on. I remember what stairway I was looking up on as I was being driven home. I get in my car and I leave. And I then go to Texas for a couple months to hang out with friends, have clients out there. Again, no idea what's going to happen next. Didn't really have very much money in my account, and was in Texas for a couple of months. And then my gut was like, all right, enough play. It's time to get to work. And I was like, all right, I think it's time to drive back to California. Rented a car with a couple of friends, drove for what felt like forever through Texas, a very large state, terrifying to stop in some of those cities. And we get to Los Angeles, get to a part of the west side of Los Angeles I'd never heard of before, to have lunch with a friend. And I look around and I go, this will do. After lunch, walked to an apartment complex, signed a lease, and slept on a pile of towels for 3 months as I built a new clientele base in Los Angeles. And that was in late 2012, 2013. And from there is when little inklings of creating a product and what you guys know as fat fudge came to be. But that is the part one, long story endless, of how did you get into nutrition and how did you get into being a performance chef. So I will leave you guys there. We've got the foreshadowing of a play offering, letting you know that fat fudge starts to become a thing at this point. We'll pick back up in a future solo episode, and we'll take you through the continued journey of Mary, the paleo chef, and how Eat, Play, Crush came to be, and fat fudge and the play offering.
When it comes to your body's performance and recovery, what's going on in the gut is critical and has historically been overlooked. And when I say performance, I'm not just talking about athletic performance. I'm talking about the overall function of your body, because my belief is if you have a body, you are performing at some level, which is why no matter age, gender, sport, or profession, starting with gut health is a non-negotiable in my practice when I'm building out a program for a client, which is why I'm very excited to share with you the sponsor of this podcast, LiveCap, a carefully crafted probiotic with a primary focus on oxygen optimization, which helps improve gut health, nutrient absorption, immune system function, and overall wellness. Many of you have probably gotten used to living in discomfort and can relate to the common factors that weaken your gut, like stress, disrupted sleep, environmental changes, and intense training. Formulated by a pioneer in the gut microbiome and brought to market by a 20-year gastroenterologist, LiveCap was created for athletes, weekend warriors, and everyday health enthusiasts, which chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you fall into one of those categories. This is the probiotic I use personally and among all my clients, and have even my family using it. To learn more and to get yourself some LiveCap, go to eatplaycrush.com/LiveCap, LYVECAP, or just go to eatplaycrush.com. You will see it in the navigation menu. They come in cap form, hence LiveCap, or sachets. I personally get the sachets because I travel a ton.
Okay, let's get into some questions that you guys asked me. I want to start to make this a regular thing. You guys do ask a lot of great questions. And also, I appreciate all of you who watched the solo episode and took to heart my request around questions. Thank you a lot. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, what a great opportunity to go and listen to the solo episode. So in light of those of you who did listen to asking me questions outside nutrition, what about Bob? My favorite line. I feel great. I feel good. I feel wonderful. I feel great. I feel good. I feel wonderful. If you guys have seen that movie, don't hassle me. I'm local. I made that into a shirt, actually. What is my favorite food? I could probably live on eggs. I don't know if it's my favorite food, but it's my go-to food. Favorite food? Man, I'm so moody about food. The irony that I cook everything that I cook for clients and then I'm just really happy with scrambled eggs and tuna. But let me try to think about this. My favorite food. If somebody told me this was my last day on earth, what would I eat? I would probably eat as many toasted croissants as I could probably fit in. Because, like, I'm not going to be here tomorrow to deal with the consequences of gluten. So I would say croissants are my favorite food, stuffed with cheese and prosciutto and arugula and balsamic vinegar. Can I build a sandwich? What do I recommend for someone who's diagnosed with celiac? So, as you know, I'm a celiac. When it comes to autoimmune disease, no matter what the diagnosis is, the baseline recommendation is to follow a nutrition program, a diet, if you will, that will help support that. So, typically, foods that will cause a flare up for people in that classification is gluten, dairy, and soy. So, if you're not sure if that's something that you need to omit, you would want to do an elimination diet and reintroduce it. If you want to start with something pretty aggressive, you would start with an AIP diet. It's an autoimmune protocol diet. Removes a lot of inflammatory foods. You might want to remove histamine types foods. And I shy away from saying like clean foods because foods aren't inherently clean or dirty, but staying away from processed foods and staying away from grains for a period of time and seeing if your symptoms improve and then adding them back in. And you have to not just like pay attention, you want to document. The most powerful tool is journaling, not just journaling like how you feel, but also journaling symptoms. So something I do with my clients is we have a overall daily calendar of what did you eat, how did you feel, how did you sleep, but also how did you feel after every meal. And if you start to track that and color code it, green being a good day, all the way up to red being a bad day, you'll be able to see and replicate your good days of what you've been eating and then very clearly see what your bad days are like. So if this is a new diagnosis, I would start with AIP. I would start with something like paleo and then start to build paleo, which I'm sure you guys have heard me say quite a bit. Paleo means what works for me may not work for you, and what works today may not work in 6 months. And so build what's going to fit into your lifestyle and help you perform optimally. A really good person that I've had on the podcast to listen to talk about this is Adam Bornstein. He's got a book called You Can't Screw This Up. And we talk about how wellness can sometimes be treated like a religion. You pick your deity and you stick with it. But a lot of the diets that are very successful share a lot in common. And it really is about focusing on whole foods. And so you'll find that. And then it's up to you if you're someone who, like I personally, I don't feel like ever eating gluten on purpose. I don't want to feel that bad ever again by choice. Not everyone's like that. So now it's up to you if you're like, oh, I want to go on vacation and in essence go off the rails. Just know you're going to suffer some consequences to get better, and that's totally on you. And if you're cool with that, awesome. Or you might be someone that's like me. It's like, I'm going to avoid that altogether and figure out ways to dine out and travel and still maintain feeling optimal. My thoughts on genetic testing. I did 23andMe when it first came out. I used an alias name. Government won't get my information. Not because I cared for the ancestry, although I was really shocked by the ancestry because I thought I was Greek most of my life. Turns out I'm 0% Greek and way more Coptic than I thought. But I did it for genetic testing, particularly because for those of you who don't know this, you can export your raw data out of 23andMe and then upload that raw data into a third-party system that will give you your genetic mutations. We have schizophrenia. I have a family member that passed away of ALS, and I wanted to know if I happen to carry those genes, because just because you carry a gene of something doesn't mean it's going to express itself. So I wanted to know, what am I predisposed to potentially getting so I can make sure that my lifestyle will mitigate ever having to experience those things. So I think we're still learning a lot about it. I'm someone who likes to stack the cards in my favor as much as possible. And so I think it's really great to understand that. Am I the expert on it? Absolutely not. I appreciate you guys ask me questions as though I am the expert, but I like to have more information than not. And again, just because you have a gene for something or you have a family history of something doesn't mean you're ever going to have to be someone that experiences it. And I think being equipped with that information sometimes will allow you to double down on making the better choices for you today. That way you won't have to experience that later on in life. Do you think the mic picks up on my stomach growling? Okay. Brad, what do you call a chicken staring at a head of lettuce? I don't know either. I didn't look it up. It's
Is this some joke that someone said?
it's the question that I got. The answer to that joke was chicken Caesar salad. Please send more jokes. Also, I don't know if this person knows this, but on my I have an eatplaycrush.com website and then paleochef.com website, which I plan on sunsetting paleochef.com eventually. But in the section to send me a note, if you want to contact me, you have to send me a joke. It says send jokes. And I don't respond to messages that don't send me jokes. So I don't know if that person knew that I'm in that or not, but I love dad jokes so much. A new food combo or brand that I recently discovered and loved. So when I go through a cheese section, an alternative cheese section in a store, I always love trying things I haven't seen before, and I'm usually pretty disappointed. And yet I still keep doing it because I hold out hope. And I saw a feta brand at Trader Joe's, got it as an afterthought, obsessed. The Trader Joe's feta brand, and I swear to you, if you guys make this sell out and I can't get it, I'm gonna be really, really upset. But I don't want to gatekeep. The dairy-free feta cheese at Trader Joe's is spot freaking on. It even sits in the brine the right way, it crumbles the right way, it melts the right way. And the base of it is coconut and potato starch. Super clean ingredients. So I, of course, had to make spanakopita, and I made a grain-free, dairy-free spanakopita following the rest of the prompts from like my family's recipe, and it was perfection. I will post a recipe, but I am freaking out over the Trader Joe's feta. I did finally give in and get an air fryer. I get it. I get it. I usually get in my ego about home appliances that shortcut a process in the kitchen, meaning like, I'm like, oh, just respect the process. Like, I want you to see how the food cooks. But I got one to make a particular dish for a client, and I am obsessed. I get it. So if you don't have an air fryer and you've been on the fence about one, get one, and get one bigger than you think you need. Don't get the small one. Just commit to the larger one because you're going to fall in love with it. The probiotic live cap. Sponsor of this podcast. I am obsessed with that. All my clients use it. There's two versions. There's one for Gen Pop like us and one for professional athletes. The mechanism there is it helps increase oxygen to your body. You take it 3 hours before play, 3 hours before a flight if you're doing the one for athletes. And then the strong, which is Gen Pop for people like you and me, you take daily across the board. All of my clients notice a difference. I notice a difference. Those of you who have been purchasing it have been writing in and noticing a difference. I think that speaks volumes because I do know historically I would hear people are like, I don't know if probiotic brands really help me. They don't really notice a difference. So I am obsessed with Live Cap. I don't think there's anything else I'm pretty obsessed with. I'm on a high from the feta cheese. Feta. Feta is number one. This is not a question. Someone's just saying thank you for my authenticity. Thank you for picking up on that. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate when you guys send me nice notes like that. Being on the internet's kind of scary sometimes, and sometimes I don't know if I'm providing value, and sometimes I don't know if what I'm saying resonates. And I've never been one of the cool kids. I don't think I ever will, and I think that's kind of a good thing. But when someone picks up on just me being me, I appreciate those kind words. This question is, do I think blue zone diets coincide with the paleo diet? A lot of commonalities. Blue zone diets typically are whole foods, healthy foods, very well balanced. In the paleo diet, if you move the devout, like caveman-esque side of it, it really is just whole food. So I do think there's a lot of overlap there. I don't know if we're ever going to get away from labeling diets. I get it, but just focus on whole foods, make sure it's well balanced, if you need to experiment with a modality because you're treating something that makes sense, but you really just want a balanced diet and you want to do testing to make sure that you're supporting the functions of your body, and you can get even more detailed testing to see your nutrient levels and then hone in even further on the foods you should be eating. But Mediterranean diet, I really believe the Mediterranean diet is a really great gold standard to build upon, and I do see a lot of commonalities between the paleo diet and the Mediterranean diet. I will say, being Egyptian, it wasn't that difficult for me to go paleo when I found out about my celiac diagnosis. If I think back on when I first started to get sick, was around second grade. And second grade is when I stopped eating the food at home and the food my mom would prepare me because I was getting bullied in school because I wanted to fit in, and I started eating school lunches so I'd be accepted. So I was eating the Pizza Hut, whatever, the brownies, whatever was American, more Americanized food. And that's when I started to get sick. So that was really interesting to look back on, that I probably wouldn't have had that onset of getting sick so young if I had just stuck to the Mediterranean diet that I was raised eating. Something I used to believe in 100% that I've completely changed my mind on. I have to give that one some thought because I'm a pretty consistent person. There are things I've bended on or I've left more opportunity to be wrong about. But as far as a devout belief, I would need some time to think on that. This question is, what has been my favorite thing about starting a podcast? Honestly, I love that I'm not having to talk about gut health 24/7. It is such a break from that. And the guests that I have on, I'm having them on selfishly so I can learn more about myself. Logan's episode shifted my mindset. He challenged me on leadership when I felt like playing small. Mark Sisson's episode led me to a huge decision with my business. I love this side of my business that I haven't been able to really play in, which is being creative and taking lead and being a producer, if you will. So if you think about what I've been doing for the last 12 years, it's the longest I've ever stuck with one thing. And the fact that it's remained exciting for 12 years is a huge feat in itself, especially for someone who likes to have a constant stimulus in that way. So creating a podcast is a whole other part of my brain I get to exercise, and I can already feel myself improving as far as the skill set is concerned, but also improving as a human being. So it's also an arena where I can become the student again in a really impactful way. And I think that part has been life-giving for me. Being asked if I have celebrated the launch of the EPC podcast with my friends yet. This is a very violent question. I don't appreciate it. The answer is no. I have not had a chance to celebrate that or anything else yet. I know I talked about that in the episode with Tim Ferriss. I'll get to it. I keep foreshadowing and alluding to a thing that's happening with the business. I mentioned in the solo episode. I think I'm really holding my breath there. A friend of mine said on a call yesterday that he's really excited to see my ability to relax energetically and with my brain when I get to the other side of what's happening right now with the business, and really getting excited to see me be soft again. So I think I've been, without getting super heavy, I've been very tense for the last few years and working nonstop for the last 10. And I definitely want to get to a place where I can celebrate, like me personally can celebrate, but then also be in places geographically where I'm closer to people who are more likely to be able to celebrate with me. So no, I have not. And I really appreciate you holding me accountable with this question. Is black seed oil worth the hype? For the love of everything, yes. How many times do I have to post about black seed oil and thiaquinone and all of its benefits? Yes, it's worth the hype. Go check out the spotlights on my Instagram. Go check out the article on my website. And at the very least, implement it and see if you notice a difference. Yes, it's worth the hype. To the grave. It's been around since the ancient Egyptians. This is very dramatic. They say it cures everything but death. That's not true, but it does help a lot of systems in your body. No, it's not going to cure everything, but it is going to help with widespread inflammation. It's very antibacterial, very antiviral. It's one of those times where I'm like, just what would Mary do? Just listen to it. Just try the black seed oil. A lot of questions on, will I share the recipe for the spanakopita? Will I share a recipe for the grain-free pancakes? Will I share the recipes for my drinks? The answer is yes. All the recipes will be coming either in posts. I'm aiming to do one a week as far as recipes are concerned, either in stories or static post. So yes, eventually you'll have recipes to everything. Make sure you're engaged with the recipes on social media. What is my favorite movie? So many. I quote Swingers a lot. I quote Bull Durham too much. I watch Elf every year. The Money Pit. I'm aging myself. See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Clearly, like movies in the decade that I was born or before. If we're going off of quotes alone, I quote Brewster's Millions, Bull Durham, and Swingers the most. So we could say those are my favorite movies. Being asked, how did I learn to make my recipes / tailoring my food? And right next to it is a question about how to be a performance chef. So 2 parts to this. Cooking in general is something that I started doing as a child, and experimenting with bold flavors is really just about playing in the kitchen. When somebody comes to me and they want to learn how to cook for the first time, Lupita and I talked about this in the first episode. I like to introduce them to a wide variety of different spices and herbs solo on a table. So they'll set up a table, we'll put all the spices on the table, put all the herbs on the table, and you start to taste them individually and really think about, how does it feel? What does it taste like? What's the aroma coming off of? So the organoleptics of it. And then you can start pairing it with different things. This is a way to learn what spices you like, especially if you're someone who hasn't grown up being exposed to a lot of different spices. Another way how to get good at cooking is to pick 2 or 3 recipes and really, really master those 2 or 3 recipes where you feel very confident that you can cook them without the recipe in front of you. And then you can start to play with different variations. And so I tend to recommend learning how to make a dish in a saute pan, learning how to make a dish in the oven, learning how to make a dish with like a pressure cooker or a slow cooker. And that way you can experience different modalities of cooking. And when you feel confident in those, you will likely feel confident to be able to play with variations and play with different recipes, and you start building upon that repertoire. As far as tailoring recipes, and if you're talking about like performance chef, it's really just listening to blood work. So I will listen to a client. What are you feeling? How are you sleeping? What is your current diet like? Then we run labs. All right, they're deficient in this. Your hormones are doing that. Then I go and look up, what's the mechanism in the body that is causing this? Okay, what are the nutrients that are potentially involved with this mechanism? Where are those nutrients found in what foods? And then I look at, what's the minimal effective dose? What's the minimal amount of this particular food that they need to have in order to feel a difference? And then I take those list of those foods and those dosages of those foods, and at this point, I could just make a dish with that. But if you're just starting out, you would then look at recipes or look for recipes that incorporate those foods and those amounts. So it just takes a lot of like legwork to get there. And you do that over the course of days, weeks, months, and a decade. And you too can become a performance chef or become the director of wellness for your own body. It just takes time, essentially. Actually, a question I get asked a lot is, how could someone become a private chef today? One of the first things that I did when I started to experiment a little more seriously about being a private chef was I just created a Yelp page. As simple as that. Yelp page, here's my website, here's what I do. And it did create some lead gen, but I also at the time was the only one doing it. So the lead gen didn't actually become as important because I was getting the types of clients that I was getting. I also just posted what I was doing to social media. When I left corporate America, I posted that I left and that this is what I'm doing and shared it to Instagram so people are aware of what you're doing and they'll ask questions. If you are looking to do something in your area, I would go visit gyms and let the gym owner know that there's a private chef in town who can do performance stuff. And I think what you have to be very aware of, you're not going to jump into being a performance chef, even if you study your butt off and know even more than me. You don't get to step day one into a situation where you're going to get paid thousands of dollars from one client to do it. So be humble about it and go to, like I said, local gyms and take on a few clients doing meal prep for a dollar amount that makes sense for your area to start building a portfolio and start building the opportunity to share that content to your social media and then start to experiment with different recipes. But you can go as micro as grassroots efforts in your own backyard while you're building a portfolio of the more macro and sharing your knowledge and your recipes and what you're doing on social media. If you're starting a business today, something that you'll have to make peace with early on, especially if you're just starting out right now, is you're not just the function of the job that you're doing or the craft that you're doing. You're also a media company. And in order to gain traction in the lane you're trying to build for yourself, you have to market yourself. So whether that's grassroots efforts in your neighborhoods, if you want to be a performance chef, if you want to be a private chef in the lane of physical performance, you can go to the gym and offer your services that way. You need to be posting to social media. And as you get the clients in the neighborhood that you're in and you're cooking those meals, that's all content that you're going to post on social media that you're going to be able to share and highlight everything that you know while you're continuing to learn and build that portfolio. And I know it's super cliche, but you have to put in that work. And over time, the referrals and the inquiries happen all by themselves. Sometimes it happens really quick and like really appreciate when it does. And sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, there's two trains of thought of like go all in, but also don't be reckless. Don't impact your livelihood. Mark Sisson's episode is really good about this of how to build something in a way where you're not sacrificing your lifestyle. But just be, if it's something you really, really want to do, just be very consistent. And I would say start at the gym level because you're dealing with people who may not need as much detail in their performance food. And when you feel comfortable with that, then walk over to a college and offer your services to college athletes where you start to build upon that. And again, all of that becomes content. And now you essentially like graduated in your own curriculum and you just keep building upon that. But I would start with something very low hanging fruit, which is just helping people in your community, even if it's your friends or family. How to charge as a private chef. Something I think a lot of new chefs, especially if they don't have a culinary background, get wrong is they try to price out their packages on a per meal basis. Like, oh, I'll only charge a client $15 per meal or $20 per meal. That makes sense for like a meal service. That does not make sense for a private chef. And maybe it's because of my background in tech and my background in consulting and my background in consulting with investing is I view it as a value of time. So somebody is paying for my time as a consultant in the arena of performance where it intersects with culinary offerings. So for me, I think about what do I want to make per hour? I consider the time being spent menu planning, doing research on what that particular client might need, the time spent grocery shopping, the time spent cleaning up, the time spent traveling, the time spent consulting with the clients throughout the week and the follow up, if there's going to be calls with their trainers, if there's going to be calls with their doctors. And I will come up with, okay, it's going to take about this many hours per client per week. And then I think about my per hour rate. And that ends up becoming what I price out either per week or per month. For my clients, it's a monthly rate and it's over a period of time depending on their projects. So what I see chefs do that ends up making them resent their clients or resent their work is they will price it $15 a meal, $20 a meal, but they're working 10, 15 hours a day. And at the end of the day, they're making pennies on the dollar. So you have to really respect your time and then communicate that with your clients. And when they're like, oh, it's like $50 a meal. And you're like, nope, it's not $50 a meal. It's actually the time spent. Like, do you want to grocery shop? Because that's like 2 hours out of your day. Do you want to learn all of these different recipes? Do you want to do all of this cleanup? Like, how much time am I saving you? I'm taking that on, and that's what you want to be compensated for. And in the beginning, if you need to take the clients, I totally get it. Get the money you need. But at some point, be comfortable being okay telling a client, I understand that you don't understand my rates and I'm just not the right chef for you. Because there are clients that will respect that time and you don't have to bring down the value of what you bring to the table. And you'll get to a position where I'm at where there's a really great visual concept, visualize value. Let's correct it off camera. And it's really cool. It says turning the screw, $1. Knowing which screw to turn, $9,999. So you'll get to a place at some point, or at least this is a place that I am in, where I build based on my knowledge and the fact that I know which screws to turn. So someone might think, oh, it's not that hard to cook. No, it's not, actually. You can totally prepare the foods yourself. Go for it. But if you want to know which foods to prepare, especially in a performance aspect at an elite level, it takes more than just knowing how to cook food. And so you'll eventually get to that point. And if you're not there, know that you're going to get there and start to practice with playing with your rates to get there. But I don't want you to shortchange yourself. And I love questions like this, by the way, if you guys have other questions around building out your pricing models. That's all I've got for this solo episode of the Eat, Play, Crush podcast. I'm really excited to jump into part 2 of my journey as Mary the Paleo Chef. And I really enjoyed your guys' questions. So pay attention to my stories. Next time I throw up an AMA, I'll collect your questions and we will address them. And we'll answer them in a future solo episode of the Eat, Play, Crush podcast.
And that is it on today's episode. Thanks so much for hanging out. Your time and attention never goes unappreciated. If anything in today's show stood out to you, I encourage you to share it to social and tag me. That is how you can help a little independent show like mine grow. And of course, rate, review, and subscribe to Eat, Play, Crush wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you want to follow me, I'm at Paleo Chef on social media or the show at Eat, Play, Crush. If you want to stay in touch via my newsletter or get your hands on the gut reset, visit eatplaycrush.com. And until next time, be well, do good, and trust your gut.